Welcome back to The Explainer. All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're unpacking Lesson 39, Active Note-Taking Systems. We're going to completely flip the script on how we absorb complex info, taking it from this dull, passive chore and turning it into a massive active advantage. Seriously, if you've ever stared at a page of your own notes and thought, what on earth does any of this actually mean, you are absolutely in the right place.
Let's kick things off with a pretty fundamental question. How do you actually know if you've truly learned something? Sounds totally simple, right? But think about it for a second. Is it just when you hit the end of a chapter? Or maybe when your favorite highlighter finally runs out of ink? You know, we constantly fall into this trap of thinking that just running our eyes over text or mindlessly copying words down somehow equals learning. But as we're going to see today, that passive approach, it's just a complete illusion.
So here's our roadmap for The Explainer. We're covering 6 main steps today: the note-taking trap, active versus passive notes, processing for a purpose, the active learner's toolkit, mastering the 3 C's, and finally, the path to independence. And by setting this clear purpose right out of the gate, we're actually modeling the exact active learning behavior we're about to dig into.
Section 1. The Note-Taking Trap.
Okay, the absolute biggest trap in studying is simply accepting information without reacting to it. Think about it. When you're just mindlessly highlighting entire blocks of text or furiously transcribing direct quotes without even pausing to think about what they actually mean, you are falling headfirst into this trap. It gives you this totally false sense of security. You look at your notebook, see it absolutely crammed with words, and tell yourself, awesome, I studied. But here's the reality. If you haven't reacted to the info, if you haven't really processed it, it definitely hasn't entered your working knowledge.
That's why evaluating your current note-taking strategies is absolutely critical. A lot of our most common habits, like trying to literally transcribe absolutely everything you read or hear, they actually end up sabotaging your research goals. You end up drowning in a sea of information, but completely starving for actual understanding. You essentially become a human transcriber, not an actual student.
Moving on to Section 2. Active versus passive notes.
So the really crucial point here is this stark dichotomy. On one side, we've got passive note-taking. That's accepting what you read or hear and just jotting it down without reacting or thinking critically at all. You're acting like a sponge, right? Just soaking up whatever spills in your direction. But on the flip side, we have active note-taking. This means evaluating the information with a very clear purpose. You are constantly turning it over in your mind, thinking critically about what you're writing down, asking yourself, why is this actually useful? And how does this connect back to my specific research goals?
Which brings us to Section 3, Processing for a Purpose.
We really need a massive mindset shift here. Note-taking isn't just some chore you do after you learn something. Note-taking literally is the learning process itself. Think about how Socrates engaged his students in dialogue. Well, we write in order to understand. We write in order to clarify our thinking. When you actively force yourself to translate complex academic concepts into your own words, you're elevating your note-taking to Socratic-level critical thinking. You're essentially having a dialogue with the material. And honestly, if you can't put it into your own words, that is the ultimate red flag that you haven't actually understood it yet.
And getting active with your notes is actually biologically necessary. We humans just don't passively respond to information. If you aren't actively processing things for a specific purpose and some information is missing, well, your brain will literally step in and fill in the blanks based on its existing schemas, its pre-existing mental frameworks. It might even passively invent details that just seem to fit the context. And obviously that can lead to some massive mistakes and distortions in your understanding. Taking notes actively is what stops your brain from just cruising on autopilot and making things up.
All right, let's get practical with Section 4, the Active Learner's Toolkit.
Let's turn all this theory into some real practice with 4 actionable guidelines you can use in your very next lecture. Number 1, always listen or read for the main points. We're talking the core dates, events, or primary reasons. Number 2, keep an ear out for key words, like crucial names and concepts. Number 3, focus heavily on noun phrases and verbs. You really want to strip away all that unnecessary grammar. Drop the determiners like a, the, is, and are. Just capture the purely essential data. And number 4, aggressively use abbreviations and symbols wherever you possibly can. Now, utilizing that shorthand directly frees up a ton of your cognitive bandwidth. For example, instead of writing out the words led to, just quickly draw an arrow. Instead of writing the same as, just slap down an equal sign. For example, simply becomes e.g.
By doing this, your hand isn't desperately racing to keep up with the speaker's pace. Instead, your hand moves efficiently, and that frees up your brain to actually focus on evaluating the concepts being discussed. You're saving serious time and, more importantly, mental energy.
Next up is Section 5, Mastering the 3 C's.
So, okay, you've taken the notes, but how do you actually know if they're any good? You need to anchor yourself to a really memorable framework, which brings us to the 3 C's: clarity, comprehensibility, and completeness. Whenever you finish up a lecture or a reading session, use this as a quick checklist to grade your own work. Ask yourself, are these notes visually clear? Are the abbreviations comprehensible? Meaning, are you actually going to remember what that random squiggly arrow meant a week from now? And finally, completeness. Did you manage to capture the full argument, or are you just left with a bunch of scattered, disconnected fragments?
Reviewing your notes like this is absolutely vital because it fosters critical awareness and self-reflection. You really have to evaluate whether your notes are accurately connecting ideas together. Do they identify the actual flaws in an argument? Have you successfully synthesized your sources? Because if you look down at your notebook and it's just a jumbled random list of facts, well, you haven't really applied the 3 C's yet, and you definitely need to synthesize that information further.
Let's bring it all home with Section 6, the path to independence.
This is where active note-taking goes from being just a simple study hack to a pretty profound educational philosophy. Arguably, your ultimate goal as a student is independence. When you finally shed those passive habits, when you stop just sitting there waiting for a teacher or a textbook to magically spoon-feed you the answers, and you actually take control of your own processing, that is when you step into true academic and intellectual autonomy. Active note-taking is basically the bridge between merely being taught and actually becoming an independent thinker.
This whole system rests on 4 key pillars of independence. First, responsibility. You are taking ownership of your own learning gaps. Second, initiative. You aren't waiting to be told what to write down. You are actively seeking out the main points. Third, critical awareness. You're evaluating exactly how one idea connects to another rather than just blindly accepting everything as truth. And finally, self-reflection. You're looking at your own work objectively. By evaluating your sources and filtering them through your active note-taking system, you are quite literally building your own unique intellectual voice.
I want to leave you with this final, inward-looking provocation right from the text. What would I ultimately like to achieve as a writer, and what will my niche be? Think about that. As you start applying your new active note-taking system, remember that every single note you synthesize, every little connection you draw, is actively helping you carve out your own unique position and voice in your field. So let's stop being passive sponges, let's start processing with a real purpose, and go find that niche. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.